From Archie to Calvin and Hobbes to Batman, comics are an American staple. Whether it's a short comic strip or comic book series, these visual storylines pull you in and make you feel like you're in a different time and place. They're easy to read and follow, and there's a comic out there for everyone. If you're an adult listening, you probably have fond memories of flipping through the colorful pages of a comic you used to love.
Almost everybody I've talked to has some kind of childhood, strongly forged connection to comics. It could be, for everybody, it's different, right? For some people, it could be Spider-Man. For other people, it could be Little Lulu. For other people, it could be Archie or Richie Rich. For younger people now, it could be the graphic novels of someone like Raina Telgemeier. But everybody has this extremely strong and visceral memory of saying, I saw this words and pictures, these comics put together, and it's stuck with me, and it's been formative in my experiences and in my life, even just as a strongly remembered emotional moment.
That's Jeremy Dauber, a professor of Jewish literature and American studies at Columbia University. He's also the author of the book American Comics, A History. He says that comics are so pervasive in American culture because the illustrated storylines appeal to everyone in one way or another.
This was part of a lot of Americans, kids, grown-ups, daily routine, was they had some comic, right? They picked up the newspaper in the morning, right? They read the comics, right? This was part of who they were, and it wasn't surprising that the strips developed to address and think about all sorts of concerns and issues and emotions and feelings that people had in their everyday lives. It really was a reflection, and remains a reflection, of who people are. And that is something that makes it so magical.
So how did this unique art form of combining pictures and words together come about? Dauber says that world historians don't have a definitive answer about when comics first began, but in the U.S., the first prototype was seen as early as the colonial period. It started off small, slowly gaining traction, and gained larger popularity around the time of the Civil War.
That's really when people are beginning to get these cartoons and comics in their weekly reading and their weekly enjoyment in a way that really crosses the entire country. And it really takes off around the end of the 19th century with the rise of newspaper chains and syndicates and newspaper titans who want something that's going to really bring readers in, something exciting and visually stimulating that's going to bring readers in, and comics was the answer for that. So that's really when our story takes off.
One of the most influential people of this time was Thomas Nast. The German-born editorial cartoonist is recognized today as the father of the American cartoon. He's famous for the creation of Uncle Sam and his bold, political-driven cartoons that exposed widespread greed and corruption and poked fun at the powerful.
Nast was brilliant at the art of cartooning, not only because of the careful draftsmanship and his capability of sort of getting a scene down in this visual imagery, right? This is when photography is still very much in its infancy. And so, you have these drawings that really tell it. But also he's capable of creating these incredibly impactful symbols, these icons of cartooning that really sort of say a lot in a single kind of image.
While Nast is best known for his political cartoons, surprisingly enough, he's also responsible for the classic image of Santa Claus. He first drew Santa Claus in January 1863 in the magazine Harper's Weekly, giving the character a long beard and rounded belly. Dauber says that at the time, these characters were often used to spread pro-Union propaganda.
He was also writing and drawing these cartoons that created a kind of sympathy for the Union at the time of the Civil War, because he just was able to put symbolic material and sort of representation in one sort of incredibly powerful package. And comics can do that at their best.
Thomas Nast stayed a key figure in the creation of American cartoons until his death in 1902. By then, comics had really taken off as people in rapidly expanding urban areas relied more on newspapers for information.
These newspaper titans, people like Joseph Pulitzer or William Randolph Hearst, they really wanted to bring as many people to their newspapers as possible, of course. And so they realized that comics, which were had wonderful pictures, very sort of attractive. They could be attractive to little kids who could convince their parents to buy a favorite paper. They were good for people whose English might not have been quite so strong, so that they weren't have to reading so much of the text-heavy aspects of the newspapers. These were great circulation leaders. And so people like Pulitzer and Hearst started using increasingly technologically advanced printing presses to publish comics that had really interesting stories, very funny moments, were wonderfully drawn. And that would say, I want the paper with the Cats and Jammer kids in it, or the Yellow Kid in it, or Blondie in it, as time went on.
The popularity of these cartoons stayed constant throughout the 20th century. Illustrated stories broke up the imposing walls of text in newspapers and drew a more diverse audience. As a result, some comics gained such a following that they moved to a serial format that would continue the storyline from one day to the next.
There's a very old statement that you're not selling today's paper. They already have today's paper. What you're selling is tomorrow's paper. So a comic was great for this because it said, okay, well, I got to tune in tomorrow to see what the next installation of the story is going to be.
Dauber says that some of these already published serial comic strips were later reprinted and turned into the earliest comic books. From there, comic books also became a birthplace of news stories as superheroes like Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman came to life in the late 1930s and early 40s. Fast forward a couple decades, and the age of superheroes really took off with influential people like comic book writer Stan Lee driving storylines.
It starts with kind of the revamping of some of those old, what we call golden age superheroes like the Flash and Green Lantern. But very soon after that, there comes a new revitalization of the superhero genre with what comes out of what we now know as Marvel Comics, right? And it is pretty fair to say that the energy of that new revitalization comes from the partnership of two or three people. One of them is Stan Lee, one of them is a guy named Jack Kirby, and one of them is a guy named Steve Ditko. And between the three of them, they have come up with a lot of the people who we're seeing all over sort of the movie screens today.
Characters like Spider-Man, the Hulk, and Doctor Strange still persist today because they're relatable and exciting. Dauber says that narratives where these characters have love trouble or can't make rent add another layer of reality to the mix.
These kind of concerns made them much more appealing to a slightly older audience, including a college audience, which at that point was quite rare for these kind of mainstream superhero comics. And that really kickstarted a new wave in thinking about what this kind of comic book could do.
Today, the field of comics looks a lot different. Comic strip characters like Garfield and Peanuts have turned into TV and film adaptations. Superheroes first seen in comic books are now part of a multi-billion-dollar industry. Even physical comic book publishing has moved online, allowing more creators to take part. The concept and creativity behind comics is quite unlike anything else. And similar to any other industry, it's always changing. To find out more about our guest, Jeremy Dauber, visit viewpointsradio.org. You can find his book, American Comics: A History, available online and in bookstores now. This segment was written and produced by Amira Zaveri, studio production by Jason Dickey. I'm Gary Price.